The Front Row Show does not reflect the views of Utah State Athletics, or its affiliates.
Excuse me, what the hell's going on out here?
I wish I could say something that was classy and inspirational, but that just wouldn't be our style.
Stick this in your trophy case.
The Aggies are in their last week of training camp with the start of the season right around the corner. We finish our season preview with special teams and coaches this week on The Front Row Show. What is up, Aggie fans? Welcome again to The Front Row Show. As always, we are your hosts. I'm Matt Sonnenberg.
I'm Lance Rasmussen.
And I'm Jeff Browning. We've spent 5 weeks kind of previewing the upcoming Utah State football season. We've talked the schedules, both in and out of conference. We've gone into position groups. We've dived into the offense, the defense. And like you said, it's time to dive into special teams and coaching staff. But first, there was a scrimmage on Saturday, which was kind of the last chance for players to put in the final word for playing time. And so, to be honest, I really didn't see much of it because I was working. So, Matt here.
Jeff was watching over your children on the bouncy
I
toys.
was, and making sure they didn't break their neck, which actually, ironically, someone actually did get injured. So
That's your fault.
Well,
I know,
It's all
I feel
on your
bad,
head.
but hopefully the child is okay and that he's still an Aggie fan for life. So Matt's gonna have to tell about the scrimmage.
well, Lance was there too.
I showed up for a bit.
So
You were there?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Was it a
Were you in a
tie-
tuxedo?
I was in a tie and
he was in the
shirt,
running for
but-
best dressed.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
But the scrimmage, so it started off with 7-on-7 drills while all the offensive and defensive linemen went and played in the end zone and did drills. That was with the starters getting those reps in. And it was, it's cool to see. You get a little bit of taste of pass coverage, but it's just not quite the real thing. After that, for full contact drills, it was pretty much just second, third, fourth strings going out there and battling it out. And I think if there's one thing you can really take away from that scrimmage, it's that we do have depth on this team, and some of it's pretty good. Especially, we've talked about the defensive backs. We've seen the lines, and I think in a big way, especially for the offensive line, the younger guys, I think that kind of experience is really good for them to get out there and really put to the test.
Well, and I think it's a big thing for them to be able to stand up and really vie for time. It was actually something that I believe came up in Coach Orlando had a YouTube video that showed up off the website of him mic'd up during practices, and it's one of the phrases he used was "get on the bus," which I have no confirmation on this, but I assume means you want to earn your place in being able to go out, travel, and play with the team. And that really is, I think, something they're using to motivate these kids. The fact is just about every position on this team is open for competition at this point. Obviously, I don't think anyone's going to come and replace Chucky as our starting quarterback. Joe Hill's going to be in his place. But there is opportunity at every single spot if you're gifted enough and you're willing to put in the effort to go out and play. Anyone's going to be able to come and make a difference.
Well, one of the great things I heard about, again, because I didn't get the chance to watch it, is the performance of Wyatt Houston at the tight end. I thought he, from what I understand, had an excellent scrimmage and is really starting to kind of pique some interest at that second tight end position behind DJ Talavea.
Yeah, 3 catches for 31 yards for Houston. He was the fourth leading receiver as far as yardage goes, only behind Travis Reynolds, Braylon Roberts, and Lars Gunderson. But yeah, I think a lot of people came away with that impression that Houston, for a young guy at this point in camp,
really good.
It's not, out of this world to expect them to only be really picking it up and making an impact now, because it's a big adjustment coming from high school to the college game for a true freshman like him. So to be able to really start showing that he's capable of things, it's exciting. Whether or not he redshirts or if he's able to contribute this year, I think remains to be seen, but it's exciting nonetheless because we know DJ Talavea is going to be a senior this year. We're going to need someone else to step up at the tight end position next year, whether it's Keegan Anderson, Wyatt Houston, and Jefferson Court, or Derek Keller.
I think one of the big things for me as well is it kind of clarified that we have a lot more depth at wide receiver. Because, you talk about the people who were catching the ball. Yeah, it's because they were on the field more because they were playing our 2s and 3s. But the fact is they were making some incredible catches. Braylon Roberts had some awesome
crazy
game.
He had
going.
3 catches for 53 yards and 2 touchdowns.
And a forced fumble, which was an incredible play. That was actually just as I was walking out of the stadium, I got a catch sight of that one. But the fact is we went from having a position where a lot of people were going, I don't even know if anyone's going to be able to show up and be what we need it to be, to we can actually look at this and say it's going to be a strength of this team, and we have a lot of people who are going to be able to come and make a difference.
It's the last week of camp for Utah State. I think the next time people really get a chance to see this team will be in live action, either down at Utah or on the 14th for the home opener, Weber State. It's awfully exciting to see this team and to see where they're going. And just every time we watch them together, there's just so much that stands out to you.
Well, and I think one of the big things that, speaking of the crowd, there were a lot of people there.
Yes.
Over 8,000.
I mean, you get conflicting reports, and I know a lot of people are willing to point at things and be saying that those are exaggerated, but obviously they weren't actually keeping track. The chairback seats were pretty full.
The amount of children that was standing in my line to get on the Philly bus, that lasted the entire scrimmage from 5 o'clock when the gates opened until 8 o'clock when it was time for autographs. That line was constant. And so
if you just want to get a good feel of how many people were there, afterwards when they did the little meet and greet in the autograph session,
yep,
I left with some people and went out to eat. We went to Mo Steaks, which they take a minute to cook your food. It's worth
it. It's a distance away too.
And you got to drive there. We ate our food and hung out for another 20, 25 minutes. And then I had to drop someone back off at the stadium to get their car. And we decided, what the heck, let's go on in. Looks like there's still stuff going on. This is, an hour or so after it had all ended, and there's still a line of people waiting to get autographs because there was just that many there.
They announced that autographs would end, and credit to the players, they were like, yeah, right. So the clock expires. It's technically supposed to end. I think it was supposed to end at 8:30. And the players were still there another half an hour, 45 minutes. And my last thought on that is the last person off the field, the last person signing autographs was Matt Wells. He stayed and signed everybody who wanted his autograph. And that means a lot when you're breeding a community culture like we're talking about here at Utah State.
And maybe the most important thing is it's great to see people care that much.
Yes.
Yep. Everyone wants to be close to this program. They want to, even if it's just for a brief moment, interact and shake hands with these players because, it seems like such a little thing to just, shake hands and say, good luck this season. But for a lot of people, that means a lot. And to have just the players acknowledge them and say thank you, it goes a long way, and it's great to see this with the program.
It's a major shout-out to the people of the Valley, the Aggies who traveled in from outside the Valley, from the Salt Lake area, wherever you came from. This is a wonderful step to really showing what the support that we're putting toward our team is capable of doing.
We had people coming in from Oregon and L.A., California, just to watch us, and so the support is there for everybody. We've talked about how potent our offense can be. We've talked about how dominant our defense is. And for Utah State to have a complete season, it's going to come down to special teams in some of these games. So let's dive right into the special teams, just like we've done before. Let's start with place kicker, guys. And it's a competitive battle between Nick Diaz and Josh Thompson for that spot.
Yeah. I haven't been shy about it, but I think Nick Diaz has to be the guy. Once he was plugged into that role last season, he was great. And if you even look further back, he was a guy recruited with a lot of hype that we thought was going to really take this kicking game and lock it down for possibly 4 years. Development takes time for some guys, and it's impossible to predict. But last year, it looked like Diaz finally came around and was a valuable option. I think he missed, 3 field goals? Yeah. But pretty much all of them were dead center. They just were long ones that came up short. But, if you can have a guy that is accurate and very good from within 45 yards, that's all this offense needs.
Well, I think it's one of the big things you got to remember, and some of the players tweeted out about this the other day, but you can win a game on a field goal. It's one play. You can win a game on one play. You can't lose a game on one play. Then I think that's what you need to go out. And for me, it's that winner's mentality that we have now. And I think whoever ends up kicking the ball, and both of them have shown some greatness through their time. Both of them have shown consistency. I think obviously Diaz is the guy right now because we've seen him stand up at the end of last season. He's been favored. But it's whoever's going to be able to go out and be consistent in the role that they have been given. And we've seen some good stuff out of camp so far. I remember the other day that practice thing, they had a stiff wind, and they were having to curl the ball around some pretty insane conditions, and they were drilling them. Game time situations are obviously going to be a bit different, but I've got a lot of faith in our kicking game this year.
It's no coincidence that they end every practice with a stiff heckling of the kicker, because I've called it, and I feel that there will come a game this year where you're going to need your kicker to have the steel to walk onto the field and knock it through to win a game. And a game like a USC or even the opener against Utah, you're going to need your kicker to step up in a big position and perform the kick. And, hopefully Nick Diaz is the guy, and, you kind of don't know until it actually happens if he has the mentality to do it. But so far, so good, I think, and actually, hopefully, we don't find ourselves in too many positions to actually need.
I'd
need
love
that
to be
this year.
ahead to the point where we're not kicking anything that important. But we've seen him step up in big situations and make it happen. So,
moving on, let's talk about the punting duties. And Jaron Bentrud has that job wrapped up.
Yeah, talk about a guy that has really progressed. You look at Bentrud last year during the season and in camp. It looked like it was going to be a dark day when we lost Tyler Bennett to graduation last year. But then this past spring, Bentrud came out and was just bombing the ball. And he's been doing it again through camp. Occasionally you might see one that squibbles off the wrong way, and you got to lock that down. I mean, that's something you can't have come the season. But he has shown a lot more ability than I thought he had. And I think we're going to be just fine at that spot.
Well, I think Tyler Bennett was actually one of the underrated weapons we had on our team, and I hate referring to punters as weapons because it's very Brent Guy-ish in my mind. But the fact is he gave us some amazing opportunities pinning people inside the 20-yard line with his leg. And I think we've got, with Benford sitting back there, you see flashes of hang time and you see flashes of distance. If he can unite those, we're going to be in fantastic shape, especially with the speed that we're going to be bringing on our defensive
That's where the
front.
hang time really makes a difference, is our guys can pursue that ball so well now.
Yep.
Well, if you want to talk about the value of a punter, just look at the La Tech game from 2 years ago here in Romney.
Oh, my gosh.
Their punter won them that game because it was a game of field position. And when you get in games like that are defensive slugouts, you got to have the guy that can pin the opposing team back on the 5-yard line. And in that game, I mean, their kicker was their best player. Their punter was their best player.
To his credit, he then won the award for best punter in the nation.
That guy was incredible.
Yeah,
I remember being in the press box and his punts being above my head. That's how high he was. And, the common thing I think with special teams, if you look over the last couple of years in Utah State's losses, it seems like special teams has kind of played a weakness, whether it is a missed field goal or a bad punt, allowing a touchdown return, or in the case of the Colorado State game a couple years ago, not being able to handle punts or kicks.
Or not fielding an onside kick from the opposing team.
Exactly.
I mean, I hate to bring up Auburn, but that was what it came down to in a lot of ways.
This is the kind of the theme that special teams plays such an important role in a successful season. And if you look at who's handling the punt return duties or the kickoff return duties, JoJo Natson, guys, we talked about him as a playmaker, and he's even said he wants to be the guy who makes plays. You put him back there on punt returns, and he's got the skills to break one.
Yeah, we've seen his hands all through camp. I mean, that has been very apparent. I think out of all the wide receivers, his hands have been the best. And you see what he can do in the open field. He runs well. He accelerates quickly. He's shifty, elusive. And you can really look at it and think there's going to be instances where defenders aren't going to be able to see him through traffic. I mean, he's so short out there that it's going to be tough for people to spot him. He's quick enough to outrun guys. I think he could be a very, very valued weapon at the punt return position.
And the fact is we got more people behind him as well. I mean, Glover Wright almost broke one for a touchdown whistled the other day. He's not even part of our receiving core. We've got receivers. Reynolds could make some difference there. Van Leeuwen's got for sure. He's got
Van
sure
Leeuwen,
hands
I think, is another guy on punt returns that could be the safer bet that we've kind of gone with mostly last year with Cam Webb, who was fantastic in that role. But punt returns were one of those things where last year it felt like we wanted to just have the ball. Make sure we have the ball, fair catch, that's fine. But with JoJo, if we can get the protection, suddenly we're in a situation where it's like, all right, well, we might break some and set up our offense in some really good field position situations.
It's really interesting because I think JoJo's got things kind of tied up for the role right now. But the fact is we've got 3 or 4 people behind him. Any one of them could see the field at any time. And it's one of those nice things is there's enough depth at the position that who do you game plan for?
Yeah, I think, and going to the actual kick returning, that's another spot where we have a lot of options. I think Kennedy Williams is a guy to watch out
bring him
for
up.
because he is from the same family as Kerwin.
Well,
who if his freshman season, if you remember, Kerwin Williams set the NCAA record for kick return yards. I think it may have been broken since then because there was a guy for New Mexico State that also broke the previous record that year. Kerwin just had more. It was a volume thing. We gave up a lot of touchdowns, so therefore had a lot of kick returns. But I mean, Kerwin was still very good at that. I mean, we weren't the first team to return a lot of kickoffs that year. My X factor though in all of this is Tay Glover Wright.
Mm-hmm.
You look at him; his athleticism is insane. And when he was returning that kick on Saturday's scrimmage, he looked to me exactly like Devin Hester does returning the ball.
Right.
And I mean, he's in that class of athlete, maybe not, elite NFL, but at least Mountain West elite. And to have that option is spectacular. I think he could be a guy that if he's given that role, and I think he obviously is going to be in competition for it, is going to do something good. He will break one. He has to.
My big thing for this year is that there will come a moment where special teams will win us a game this year. I believe that will happen, whether that is on a kickoff return, punt return, or even just being able to punt the ball and pin the team deep and allow your defense to go do work. Those are moments that you don't really think about, but they matter so much in football. And if your special teams are great, then the rest of your team is great. It all correlates that way.
Well, and the fact is it's a weird thing to say, but our special teams were actually probably the highlight of our system for a few years there.
The Brent Guy years.
From the Brent Guy years, that's really where things excelled. I don't know, how long has it been since we've had someone break a kickoff?
Kerwin did against Nevada in 2011.
2011?
I believe it was.
I think it's about time.
No, it would have been 2010.
2010?
Yes.
Because I guess he didn't handle on new things in 2011, did he?
No, he did not. Chuck Jacobs took over that role and was great at it.
Let's.
He nearly broke a handful.
Yeah, I think it's time we take a couple back.
I mean,
so
let's
Kevin
have it happen
this year.
Robinson visited practice the other day. He had to have given some pointers because Kevin Robinson was phenomenal at
He was
that.
incredible.
If I believe it still stands, but Kevin Robinson is the all-time leader in NCAA history in yards per touch. When he touched the ball, whether it was, and this is combining kick returns, pass receiving, or punt returns, all these facets. When Kevin Robinson touched the ball, he averaged more yards than any other player ever. And I mean, obviously, a lot of that is going to favor guys that are returning the ball or they're returning kicks. But still, it's an impressive statistic.
It's an impressive statistic. Yeah.
And you look back even to those other years, a guy like Chris Ulinski, people remember him.
Yeah.
He was automatic for putting the ball in the end zone for a touchback. Teams were not going to get a return on him, and there's value in that.
Yep.
Our defense never had to worry about anything less than 80 yards, which now it's the touchbacks go to the 25, so 75 yards. But still, I mean, if opposing offenses have to go that distance every time, you're in a good spot.
Yep.
This 2013 Utah State football season really began in December of 2012 when Matt Wells was hired to replace Gary Anderson. Matt, me and you went to that press conference. We actually walked in the door at the same time as Matt Wells. So we feel a special connection to our
Didn't
to our
we
head
go
coach.
straight there from KFC?
We did. Dominated KFC, and then we went to the Matt Wells press conference.
Ironically, I was actually hanging out in the hall with Steve Schwartzman from Rock Jacks.
Nice.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Who knew we
were
would
sitting
all come
outside.
together?
I know.
So really, this current show came together at that moment in a weird way.
We all owe it to Matt Wells. Yes.
Thank you, Matt. But when you think about what has transpired since then, Matt Wells as the head coach, the mark he has left on this team, the hiring of Todd Orlando and the other coaches, it's time to really look at this coaching staff and really determine the impact they're going to have on this team. And honestly, it does start up top with Matt Wells.
Yeah, I mean, It's interesting how it all unfolded because we had the hiring of Matt Wells immediately. He was announced as the new head coach before Gary Anderson was announced at Wisconsin. I mean, and I know there's a technicality with Wisconsin's laws of state employees that held that up, but still, we knew that was going to be the case. And then it took forever to assemble the entire staff. And I remember a lot of people were impatient. They wanted news of, who's going to be coaching this position and whatnot.
Gloom and doom.
Who from the previous staff will be retained. And it was one of those things where Matt Wells seemed to know what he was doing. He took his time, but you look at this staff and it seems like top to bottom, he got a home run at every position. I mean, every different position coach, whether it was retaining guys, which I think is crucial. Retaining guys, especially on the defensive side of the ball, to continue what we've been doing, but also bringing in Todd Orlando, who has a lot of success, bringing in Kevin McGivern, who was a part of what we had done already under Gary Anderson and had ventured off for a few years. Luke Wells, coming straight from a Big 12 program, and keeping it all in the family. But it's impressive to see the staff and what Matt Wells did. And I feel, at first Matt was nervous, didn't know how to handle maybe the pressures of coaching, but you can just sense it now in his interviews, his demeanor, that he's gotten so much more comfortable in this role since just the start of spring practice.
He is a commanding presence as a head coach. Really is. He is a little bit shorter in stature than Gary Anderson, but the way he commands your attention is unbelievable. And he has the total and full respect of the football team. Going to these practices and you watch at the end when he gathers the team around him and they have a discussion and all eyes are on him. I think one of the most critical things Matt Wells did in his first couple months as the coach was to keep that recruiting class together. And people can just overlook that, but really that is one of the most impressive things to do. And it speaks to the character he is as a coach, because oftentimes when you have a coaching switch, you have players that decommit, they look at other options, and he lost one guy who really was more than just a soft verbal looking for a bigger offer. Everyone else stayed committed, and he even won some recruiting battles in a guy like a Marwin Evans, who Kansas State came into the game late and offered him, and he was able to hold on to him. In talking with the recruits that we did when we did our recruiting podcast, they all spoke of how if it wasn't Matt Wells, I was going to go elsewhere. But because it was him, I knew things would be good. And that to me is just, it speaks exactly to what type of head coach he is going to be.
You can also look at the lineman we got committed out of Texas like 2 weeks ago. Said, I think he said on Twitter, Matt and Luke Wells are incredible recruiters. He made specific mention of that, of how well they did and how excited they got him at the thought of being an Aggie.
Well, and as a whole, I think we have a lot to be excited about this coaching staff in general, for recruiting, for what they're bringing to the table. I remember I've pulled it up a few months ago. Someone actually ran some numbers on the coaching experience for Gary Anderson's first year and the coaching experience for Matt Wells' first year when he was here. The most important thing in my mind is the fact that they pulled up a final statistic saying that the years of coaching experience at the BCS conference level for Gary Anderson's first year here, 12 total years of experience on the coaching staff. Coach Wells' staff, 29 years of total experience that's coming in at the BCS conference level that is now coaching up at our institution. The fact is we've talked about it in a lot of different ways, but the infrastructure is built around people with experience who know what they're doing.
Which, for a rookie head coach, too, to have those guys that have been around the block, I doubt Matt Wells is going to be ignoring their advice, because I think that's a big reason why he brought a lot of these savvy veterans on, is because they've been there, and they can help him and say, look, we faced something similar like this years back. Here's what we did. Just my 2 cents. Let's talk and see what we can make happen here.
We wanted to talk just briefly about each coach and kind of our impressions as we've observed them through fall camp. Starting with Todd Orlando, and I must say that I'm nominating us for the presidents of the Todd Orlando fan club.
Yes.
Because the way the man interacts with his players and how excited he gets, I would go break a quarterback's legs with the 2x4 for that man, and I would not even hesitate to do it.
Well, and you look what Matt Glade said when he came on the show last week or 2 weeks ago. I would follow Todd Orlando into the fiery depths of hell. That's how motivating he is. And
As
inspiring.
presidents of his fan club, I would do likewise.
We would be pushing Matt out of the way to get in front of him in line.
Well, I think one of the cool things that the university has done lately is they've put up the videos of the coaches mic'd up online. I mentioned it a little earlier. Orlando's is just entertaining to be able to watch it and watch the way that he's individually motivating his players, but then to watch him chasing balls and doing all of this kind of thing. If you haven't gone out and checked it out on the YouTube channels, make sure you get out there and do it. I'm obviously, for me, I'm going to make repeated references throughout the rest of the day to it because it's so cool to actually watch the coaches in their element. He's an absolutely just cannonball of a guy. You can tell he is excited about every play. He wants his players to be doing the right things. And he's willing to go out there and motivate him with his own energy.
If people want to question what type of coach he is because maybe FIU wasn't very good defensively last year, he's had success at places like UConn. And having lived in Connecticut, if you can have a good football at UConn, you've done something big because UConn is a hard place to recruit football players. His defense was excellent there. They were a ball hawking defense. People in Connecticut spoke very highly of him. The thing I loved most about Coach Orlando is when he came in, he didn't make anyone else learn new terminology. He adjusted to what had already worked here. He learned the terminology. He learned the plays. And so I don't see much changing in this defense because he knows what works, and he's already made that adjustment.
I mean, he checked into a hotel room and spent days straight just studying film. It's great. There's dedication there.
And you look, pretty much everyone else on the defensive side of the ball are the position coaches that were here for Gary Anderson. And that's where you have that continuity. And let's run them down. Let's start where it all starts on the lines. Frank Male, who now is like the seasoned veteran of this staff. He was a player just 6-7 years ago for USU, and now is one of these veterans of the coaching staff. He's a guy that I feel has come a long way, and I feel I may base that a little bit on personal interaction. But when I interviewed him when I was working for the Utah Statesman, I believe it was his first year as the actual defensive line coach. He was, kind of reserved and soft-spoken, but then you see interviews with him now, and he just is so much more comfortable. You see he's really settled into the role, and you can see the results. I mean, our defensive line is really producing some depth and quality talent.
It's interesting to me to actually, because you've watched him kind of take a more public, especially this year, a more public spotlight, I suppose would be the way to put it. But the fact is our defensive line has been kind of an unheralded strength of this team for a while. I really think that he's positionally one of the most strong motivators because you look at the attitude that a lot of his linemen are going to be having this next year. I mean, you've got his direct influence over Connor Williams. I think he's the one that really speaks to me of the attitude that our line has. Yep. I think our coaching is a direct result of that.
And don't forget his key influence in the Polynesian pipeline for Utah State. Yep. It's huge.
One other quick note about him. He was, if I remember right, the first official hire of Matt Wells' staff. Mm-hmm. And it was a retention, but I think that speaks to his character and his love for Utah State. So obviously deserving of all the love back. Behind him, coaching the guys that is one of the most impressive units we've ever seen. Kevin Clune back with the linebackers, who a lot of people, before Todd Orlando came along, were crossing their fingers hoping he would be the new defensive coordinator.
I think that right there is probably one of the single most important retentions that we got out of the last coaching staff. Because the fact is the linebacker core is what our defense has been wrapped around. I mean, the 3-4 defense is based on it. Keeping him here was pivotal in order to be able to preserve this defense.
Moving to the defensive backs, Kendrick Shaver, another young, fiery coach who has some strong recruiting connections. I believe he's our strongest Florida connection still. And, I mean, look at what he's done with the cornerbacks. He put Curtis Marsh in the NFL a few years ago. He's put Will Davis there now. He's probably going to put Nevin Lawson there. And
Glover
who knows who else?
Stewart might be looking for more.
I mean, you look at what he's done with the cornerbacks. This is such a deep position now. And, I mean, this guy deserves a boatload of credit.
Not much more you can say there.
Moving over to the offensive side of the ball, Kevin McGivern. Now, we touched on him briefly earlier, and it's kind of interesting to look at his role as offensive coordinator / quarterbacks coach, because that's what Matt Wells was last year. And you've got to think, as head coach, Matt Wells is still going to be very active in running the offense and coaching the quarterbacks. And this is one of those situations where two heads are better than one. Kevin McGivern was here in 2009, which, was a phenomenal year for DeAndre Burrell. Took a big step forward under his coaching, and there's no reason to think that McGivern won't be able to do a lot of similar work with some of the talent we have at the quarterback position. And I'm excited to see what he and Matt Wells can whip up offensively, because I think it's going to be a thrill.
That familiarity is really key. He's familiar with Utah State. He's familiar what works. And I just think that's such a key thing with coordinators, and particularly when it relates to how they interact with the head coach.
For me, I got to imagine that the hardest position to hire out is the one that you're vacating, and you're going to only trust that to someone that you trust. This is me trusting Matt Wells, knowing that he has the confidence to make the hire that he did.
And not only did he entrust it to Kevin McGivern, but his brother came along with him, Luke Wells.
Coaching tight ends, co-offensive coordinator as well. So, the Wells family is going to have their hands plenty on this offense. Luke Wells is a guy that we've heard can be quite the recruiter.
Yeah.
Came from a Big 12 program, and
he's already shown that.
And you know what? Look at what we were saying about tight ends earlier in the program with DJ Tilavea, Keegan Anderson, Derek Keller, Wyatt Houston now. Jefferson Court is even in that mix, has made a few catches this camp. This could be just the very beginning of what Luke Wells does with the tight end position over the years. It's exciting to see. Outside of that, we have another big retention in Javon Bonite. He feels a lot to me like Kendrick Shaver does.
Yeah.
Another young coach, and it's so perfect that they're the wide receiver and cornerbacks coaches.
They're all great, but he's one of the best teachers out of the coaching staff. You watch him, there isn't a second he isn't teaching those wide receivers something. And it's really impressive to watch when you go to fall camp and watch him.
Yeah, and I think his impact is something we're really going to see as the wide receivers step up to their new roles this season.
Well, that was he got my shout out for the coach that could make the most impact earlier on in our casts about someone who's going to be able to make a difference. I've said it before. I got a friend from Wyoming who loved the way he was playing there. You've watched him interacting with our current players who are in the NFL and what they've been able to do. And on top of that, another great piece of film to watch is watching him when he's mic'd up. Go check the YouTube out of watching him and the way he's interacting with players. He's got a lot of fire to him. I think he's done a fantastic job with our core.
The last one of the heart and soul of the coaching staff is Dave Ungerer, the special teams coordinator and running backs coach. I believe he was the last of the main coaches to be hired. And, like we were talking about earlier, there's some things to be excited about with special teams, and it's going to be interesting. We've said that could have been a weak point over the last few years, and I think that's true. So I'm excited to see what he'll bring to the table, what he'll implement. And then as far as running backs go, talk about keeping up our tradition. That's got to be a little bit of pressure on him, but excited to see what he'll do.
Well, he has experience at big-time college football,
Yes.
Alabama, and places like that. He's been around. He knows the game well. There's one more coach we need to talk about. Offensive line, Mark Weber.
Oh, that's right.
Now, this is an interesting coach because a lot of people have taken one side or the other on him. I'm going to break your rule here, Matt, for just this one.
Okay.
He comes to Utah State.
He's been to a lot of other places that we could talk about.
Yes, but he's a lightning rod because he comes to Utah State from BYU, and BYU fans in their infinite wisdom just tarnish this guy as a worthless coach. But everything I've seen just is totally the opposite, which, you might expect that to be the case, gaining the intelligence of BYU fans. But I've been nothing but impressed with him as the offensive line coach.
Well, just look at it this way. Our offensive line this year, Phil Steele ranked them the number one offensive line in the Mountain West, one of the top offensive lines in the nation. We're returning 5 starters, so he's got a great place to work to start off in his first season. What I'm really interested to see with him is how he develops these younger guys, because while we've got this great core right now, we've wondered about the depth at offensive line, and I think that experience and having been around the block like he has and been in so many programs, I think he might be the perfect hire for this position. And, forget what everyone else says. There's a reason why he's had so many high-profile jobs and he's succeeded in different places. Even at that one school, they probably loved him 4 years ago when they had a handful of NFL caliber offensive linemen. It's just they changed a lot of philosophies of theirs to not fit what he was doing and what he had been told to do, in a sense.
And recruited to do, yeah. Well, the thing is, I read an article from Kyle Goon today in the Trib, and he talked about that Bill Vavau has been one of the absolute standout performers. You want to talk about a young guy who you're starting to develop depth in that offensive line. That's a prime example of Coach Weber taking Bill and really turning him into a standout performer.
And I think that's something. Matt brought up a point that I think can be one of those end-all, be-all arguments to things. The fact is the O-line is a pivotal part of an offense, and it's a pivotal part of a team, but you can't succeed on the O-line alone. He has been hired repeatedly at a lot of high-profile places.
Yeah.
If you're not good at your job, you don't get hired on. I mean, Matt, I think the coaches will be the first one to tell you it's a cutthroat industry. He's still coaching, and he's been at a lot of places. I'm willing to trust him. I will shamelessly steal this. The fact is his big test is going to be next season. Yeah. I think this year's line could coach themselves. I'll steal that fair line, but I really think next season is going to be where he's really going to be able to prove some people wrong.
And even looking at the rest of the staff, that's the heart and soul of it. But there's a handful of other recognizable names. I mean, David Fiafia has been here for a bit as a grad assistant. Dave Cragthorpe as a special assistant to the head coach. Handful of other graduate assistants that have been here a while. Dave Scholes, the strength and conditioning coach, who we've heard fantastic things about, who came from the NFL, a successful NFL program, obviously in the 49ers. But then a couple other ones. Fahu Tahi as a offensive administrative assistant. Yeah. He is still the all-time leader in career rushing yards in the state of Utah in high school football. I had a chance. I got to see him in albeit one game, but just an absolute truck. He spent a little time in the NFL. Good player that has experienced it, that knows how to run tough and coach up running backs. And then a guy that I actually played with in high school, Rob Takano, who is coming on as a defensive grad assistant. He is the son of a coach. His dad coached us in high school football. I couldn't tell you how many life lessons that I learned from his dad, and didn't even realize till years later the value of them. But he went on and played linebacker at SUU, even played against Gary Anderson up at USU, and was a all-conference performer down there. So, I mean, that's another hire that is going to be working with the linebackers. And I think, in a sense, we can see some cultivation of other young, up-and-coming coaches in a handful of these guys.
Yeah, and as I said before, I think it speaks for the infrastructure that has been established over the past few years. We have one of the more experienced and better coaching staffs and administrative staffs that we've ever had here. Years down the line, I think we've got success planned for a lot of years from this point out, not just for this season, but major stuff for down the line.
One other quick note on Takano too is he was going to go to Wisconsin with Gary Anderson, but there was something that fell through at the last minute, or somebody else came in the picture. But he was about to go there, and so I mean, this is somebody that was going to be sought after by Gary.
There.
Yeah, I mean, this is the Big Ten wanted him on their coaching staff essentially.
All right, Aggie fans, this is your chance to interact with us, to talk about the things that you want to talk about on the show. This is the tweet sheet.
Jalen Lebowski tweets in to start us off. Coach A was an elite game planner. Are you concerned with Coach Wells' ability to game plan?
No,
not at all. If you look at Gary Anderson's 4 years at Utah State. The first 2 years without Matt Wells on staff, he had a combined record of 8-16. With Matt Wells on staff, 18-8. I think there's something to be said about that, whether it's the overall performance of the quarterbacks in his first year as quarterbacks coach, or as the massive leap forward our offense took when Wells became the offensive coordinator. But he showed that he's capable of moving the ball against pretty much anyone. I mean, he had one slip up of a game where the team struggled to move the ball, and it just seemed like everything was off that day. I'm not worried about that, and you like we said about with Matt Wells and Kevin McGivern as offensive coordinator and the former offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach, two heads are better than one. And there's a lot of guys on this staff that are going to have insight, and I think Matt Wells brought them in with the intent to listen to them.
Don tweets in, he says, which play / drive / moment has stood out to you the most from fall camp? I can think of any number of DJ Talavea catches across the middle.
Yep.
That's kind of the first thing that stands out to me.
There's been a couple where we've all turned to each other and gone, wow.
That Alex Wheats had a few pretty impressive catches. Rashard Stewart has just been smothering at the cornerback position.
There's been a couple Fackrell and Mo Alexander.
Yeah, Fackrell's out of this world. Another player that I'm really impressed with, and I think there's something to be said about how little he played in the scrimmage Saturday. Joey DiMartino.
Yes.
Really, really stepping up as a possible, not just capable second back, but a very, very good second running back.
The fact is he has earned it, and he's earned it with. I mean, it's his own effort that's put him on the field. So good on him for it.
Garrett tweets in, what do you think of new offensive coordinator Luke Wells?
He's from the Wells tree. I don't know a ton of what to expect other than what we mentioned earlier about how what we like that we've seen out of the tight end position.
And my biggest thing that I like about Luke Wells is he hits Texas hard in recruiting, and he has some serious connections down there to the big schools. And we talked about, was it offense or defensive lineman? The recruit that committed to Utah State a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
His head coach said that Matt and Luke Wells specifically are the best recruiters he's seen at his school, and that includes the likes of Oklahoma, Texas, Oklahoma State, the big schools down in the Midwest. And he said Luke and Matt Wells are the best recruiters he's seen come through there. So everything looks positive for Luke Wells. Our good friend Brett, his question is, who is our longest tenured coach, and which coach is bringing in the biggest changes from last year?
This is where I could make my Stu Morrill joke, but I won't.
I'm assuming he means on the football coaching staff.
Yes.
I believe it is Frank Male at this point, because he spent 2 years as a grad assistant and then and then moved up to the D-line coach after Coach Chad left for Utah. I'm not even going to try his last name, but you know who I'm talking about. But yeah, I believe Frank Male is the veteran of this staff. I could be wrong. Maybe Kevin Clune is in that mix. Let me jump on the website, but no, Frank Male is the guy.
Well, it's a nice one to have around.
Yeah, definitely.
Nick Arnold, he asks, do you think Darryl Garrettson gets a red shirt? Yeah.
I would hope so.
Yeah, I think he needs it. I think he has more to gain from a redshirt year than he has to gain by seeing, only amount of snaps late in games against, scrubs where he's not going to be throwing the ball anymore.
Well, I think the fact is the team has more to gain from him playing red shirt, and it's not just about him. And I think a couple of years ago you could point back at things and go, well, he deserves or he needs it because we need individuals to come up and stand up and make a difference. We're game planning for 2016 at this point, which is a wonderful thing to be able to say. I don't think that he could come in as a reserve and necessarily do any better than some of the other guys who are going to be able to come in and play minutes after Chucky Keaton at this point. I think his experience with the red shirt is going to be able to prove itself 4 years down the line. So I would hope he could pull that red shirt.
There he is. It's Josh McDonald with this next tweet.
Aww.
Yeah. He tweets in, why should we be confident or concerned about next Thursday in Salt Lake?
Next Thursday.
I think
That's
we
so
should
exciting.
be.
That's a good way to
We
put
should
it.
be concerned because Utah's still a good team. You look at their Pac-12 record, and it doesn't speak very highly of them, but they still have a lot of quality talent. I mean, players make plays. We put a lot of pressure on recruiting and getting these highly rated recruits, and they've gotten a lot of them over the years. And while they might be struggling in their own right, they're still talented. They're still going to be big. They're still going to be fast. And look at it this way: if you were to take Utah right now and put them in the Mountain West, I think they would have to be among the top 3 teams in the conference.
Yeah,
is that fair to say?
I think that's very fair.
And we're playing this game on the road. That's why you've got to be concerned.
Now, my vote for confidence, if I can.
Speak it.
We're coming in with experience and with an established group of playmakers, which I think is something that is lacking at their institution right now. You don't have anyone who you can well, you have a few players, but there's not a core group that you can point to and be like, these guys have stood up. We know that they can accomplish something and they can come back. We have that. And I think that's where our confidence gets to come from, is our linebacking core, our O-line, our quarterback, even to a degree, our running backs and our D-line, our wide receivers are probably the most shaky of the positions that we're bringing in. But I think that would be where I'm taking my confidence, is we're returning a whole lot of experience from a group that performed. I mean, we were 11-2 last year.
My vote of confidence comes from the fact that you're looking at a group of players who in the past couple of years have been to some of the most hostile environments in football. In Wisconsin, Camp Randall is an incredible place. Auburn, the SEC, I mean, those people are crazy. And they bring it at Utah. Their crowds are great. They pack that stadium. They're loud. The Muss does a good job, at raising Cain. So there will definitely be a significant home factor for them. But these are players that have played in big-time environments. And Matt, like you said, I mean, if there's concern, it's that Utah is still talented. And this is a team that, if not for a missed field goal at the end of regulation, would have beaten us last year. And so it's kind of a toss-up game, but it's one that Utah State can be confident that if they make the plays, they will win it. Scott tweets in. Now, this is an interesting tweet. He says, "It seems like everything is sunshine and roses with USU football. What are your top 3 negatives, concerns as things stand today?" Discuss.
I'm still very skeptical about wide receivers. I think they're showing that they're improving and that they are a good unit, but I still don't feel comfortable that there's somebody at the top that's a clear-cut leader of that unit, and I think that's good to have in a wide receiver core. Mm-hmm. I also am a little concerned about Matt Wells' inexperience as a head coach. While I think he will do fine, and I think he's surrounded himself by great coaches, there is still learning to be done. I mean, it's never easy stepping into a bigger role because you're going to have to take your lumps in some way or another at some point. And we have the luxury of great talent around him, but great coaches still need to be able to use it. And while I think Matt Wells has all the potential to be great, it doesn't start that way on day one. You got to work toward it. And for a third concern, I guess the kicking game still. I can't feel totally confident in it just yet, but Nick Diaz did a lot to calm my nerves late last season.
Yeah, I think, honestly, those are probably your 3 best points. I guess the only other one that I would say is the baptism by fire that's going to be the first few games of the schedule. Because to be very honest, and I would like to believe it's not the case, but we still are a pretty young program when it comes to success. Mm-hmm. If you break the confidence of the team early due to losses, it could be very difficult for them and the community and Aggie Nation in general to pull themselves out of it. I don't think that's going to happen. I really think we're going to be able to stand up and punch just about any team that we come up against in the mouth. But if we do end up going 1-4 in our first few games, are we going to be able to recover from that?
I guess my biggest negative / concern is just special teams in general. When you look at, like I talked about earlier, you look at all the losses that Utah State has had in the last 2-3 years, the common factor in all of them is that there was something that went wrong on special teams, whether it was missed field goals, a dropped punt. There's just things that have gone wrong in that area that have really swung the game. And I just feel there are going to be games this year where special teams is going to play a critical, if not winning factor in how the team does. And that's my biggest concern, I guess, with this team. My other concern is, and this is an obvious one, if Chucky Keaton gets injured, expectations are going to change drastically because you're looking at a top 15 quarterback in the country, the leader of the team, and if he goes down, that changes the dynamics of the team in a very big way. But it's a good question because it is all sunshine, and I think a lot of it is because we were so bad. I mean, we were so bad for so many years, and the 3 of us, even the 4 of us with Trevor here, we've kind of witnessed that. And seeing where we are now compared to where we were, there's nothing but sunshine.
Well, and I think one of the big things to be honest, we have both schools down south right now are running closed scrimmages. They have 20 minutes that are open at the very end for media to come able to and watch things. All of our practices have been open.
Yep.
And I kind of look at it as our coaching staff's giving the fans a challenge, saying, come in and watch what we're doing, see what's going on. And I think
Embrace
the players, the coaches have really stood up and shown us that they've got the work ethic and the effort to put in. They're doing a lot to honestly to sate a lot of my concerns right now.
Garrett again tweets in, hey, 2 tweets. He says, how aggressive do you think we'll be towards blocking kicks, punts compared to last season?
I think it's interesting. We actually, all of our blocked kicks are returning as far as who were the players that blocked the kicks. Every single one of them is back on the line. I think the big thing, the number one that really sticks out in my mind is the block in the Utah game, obviously. Mm-hmm. And the announcers are very clear about that. That was a scheme-based block that we called. I mean, that was the second punt of the game. It came at an unexpected time. I think it's going to be 100% scheming to when it's coming unexpectedly. I think we've got the speed to be able to do it. I think you'll watch us do it aggressively. I don't think it'll be every kick, obviously, but I think you'll watch us try to hit it aggressively.
I think one note with that, if Todd Orlando is, the film nut that we would hope he is, you would think that he's going back to old practices and looking at how we prepared for these because, they saw something. Gary Anderson and Dave Aranda saw something in these, instances where we blocked kicks to scheme for it. I would hope that he's going back to that old practice film because they've got it all and really trying to see what's there and figure out, where they were scheming, maybe even call up Gary and say, hey, man, float me a bone here to keep the success going. But I think the coaching staff will be prepared for it. And you know what? Who knows? Maybe Todd Orlando has his own tricks up his sleeve that he's just waiting to show off to us.
Well, I mean, and that goes back to the video that I keep talking about being posted online. On a blocked kick, he's freaking out, and he's really excited about picking the ball up and making a return. I think his energy lends itself very well to making big plays like that.
T. Wade, he asks, who of the likely red shirts will benefit the most from it? Meaning, who makes the biggest impact next year? Karis Johnson is the guy to me that would benefit the most from a red shirt because I think he'll have a stellar impact next year. He's fast, he's big. I think we underestimate how complex an offense we run, especially when it comes to blocking schemes. And I think he's a guy that has incredible speed. And you give him a year in the program to not only learn the playbook, hit the weight room. I predict he'll be the breakout star next year.
Well, I think one of the big things is it's kind of hard for us. Have they released an official redshirt list for us yet?
No,
no, not officially.
They usually don't.
And I mean, we're not going to really be able to know.
Yeah.
I think there's a couple guys who could. I mean, Karis Johnson. We already talked about Kennedy Williams. He could see some play time this year.
It's looking like he's
there,
not going to redshirt.
Which it's an interesting dichotomy there because I think he could really use a year worth of putting on mass. But the fact is, he's making plays. I think Darryl Garrettson, honestly, is one that we've already talked about that would benefit greatly from 5 years worth of experience by the time he rolls around for his senior season. I think we could see some of our offensive linemen make some redshirting.
That's what I was going to mention. Yeah. And some of our young receivers. There's a few of these guys that have made a few plays in camp. You can see their potential, but they're not quite there yet. Braylon Roberts could be a guy in that picture. Had a great scrimmage, but also is young, and he's had some ups and downs in camp. But give him a redshirt year, all of a sudden there's going to be a lot more demanded next year when you don't have Reynolds, you don't have Van Leeuwen in the picture.
When I think the other position I think it gets to stand out really big for us is you've seen what happens when we redshirt our linebackers. You produce guys like Kyler Fackrell.
Yes.
And we've got a ton of linebackers right now. There's a lot of youth there as well. A lot of those guys are going to be able to sit back and actually watch how the game is meant to be played because our linebackers are going to be teaching a lot of teams what it's all about this year.
Another wild card candidate for redshirting is Marwin Evans, who is now moved to safety, which when he was recruited, I had a feeling based on his size that he could be a very, very good safety. If he has cornerback speed with his size, that's got elite safety written all over it. Lucky for us, we've got Brian Sweet and Mo Alexander back there who are going to hold things down pretty well. And, behind them, Frankie Sotera and Cam Sanders. But, Cam Sanders is a senior this year. Mo Alexander's a senior. So, next year there's going to be need for guys in that 2 deep at safety. And Marwin Evans could be a prime candidate to come in and possibly be the starting free safety in place of Mo Alexander.
Ogden Aggie with the last tweet of the night, he says, there has been a lot of talk about finding a go-to receiver. When 2013 is in the books, who will have become that receiver? My first instinct with this isn't necessarily to go with a wide receiver. It's to go with DJ Talavea. Again, I feel like we're beating that drum pretty hard, but it deserves to be beat. Cause
Yeah, if you've been to camp, you'd know why.
You know, you can just see the progressions that Chucky is making. 1, 2, 3, DJ. It's just kind of going that way. And with his size and his strength, and you combine that with great hands, he's a weapon that you just have to utilize.
To be fair to the question though, the
tight end is a receiver.
You could throw Joe Hill in there too. Then
that's fine. Throw him in there then.
For me, I've been talking about DJ Talavea for weeks now. I think JoJo Natson's going to be the one to make it up. In my mind,
JoJo is, for me, it's 1A and 1B. I feel either JoJo or Travis Van Leeuwen.
Mm-hmm.
Van Leeuwen really impressed me as camp has gone on. He has a lot of talent. He's got good size. He's got good hands. I think, if he takes that next step this season, he could do some great things. But also, I mean, you can't forget about Travis Reynolds. He's another guy with a lot of talent and a lot of potential that, again, if he takes that step, is going to be very good.
Thanks, everyone, for tweeting into us, as always, with your questions. You can always tweet them any time of the week at USU Front Row on Twitter. Or, if you want, send them to our Facebook page, facebook.com/USU Front Row. It's our favorite segment. We love doing it. So,
all right, Aggie fans. Now's the time in the program that we really haven't had one of these for a few weeks because we've had other things on our minds, and there's not a lot going on just yet. But today, our new man in the show, in the mix of things, Lance Rasmussen, has a rant. And I don't know if it's so much a rant, but rather an inspirational call to action that he talked about a few weeks ago and got me excited. And I'm excited for him to deliver this. And I don't even want to spoil it anymore. So with today's rant, ladies and gentlemen, Lance Rasmussen.
At the beginning of the summer, I was sitting in a car with Steve Schwartzman, who is a very good friend of mine, and we were discussing where the Aggie football team, but Aggie Nation has been in general over the past few years. We started reminiscing on what could have been probably one of the most depressing moments in Aggie history, which was when Gary Anderson ended up taking the job at Wisconsin. We found out he was leaving. The day after Gary Anderson left the program, Chucky Keaton sent him a tweet and said, "Hey, congratulations to Coach A. I'm really happy for him and can only wish him the best." At that point, someone from Wisconsin actually tweeted Chucky back and said, "Hey, Badger Nation would open our arms to you, Chucky." And Chucky Keaton replied to him, "Sorry, but Aggie Nation already has theirs closed around me." That phrase actually reverberated with myself and Steve, and it's something, interestingly enough, as we've watched what the players and the coaches have started saying over the past few weeks, months, years, that idea of our community having our arms closed around them has been something that's come up. Gary Anderson talked about it. It's actually something he talked about the players doing with each other and the fans doing to the players. Zach Vigil mentioned it in a radio interview a couple weeks ago about the fact that that's something that means something to a lot of them, that they can go out into the community and they feel like the community's arms are wrapped around them. Matt Wells talked about it earlier this week, that being able to feel Aggie Nation having their arms around their players is something that means a lot to them. Through the years, it's actually been something that I think has made a bigger difference than I think a lot of people are willing to think about and give credit for. But that idea of having our arms wrapped around the players and our athletes is something that I think is very special and very key at Utah State about what we've been able to accomplish. And it's with that we're going to introduce a new idea here on the Front Row Show. It's not something that I think needs to be put up on billboards. It's not something that needs to be paraded around and worn in the streets. In fact, this idea isn't something that I think even necessarily needs to be heard outside Cache Valley or the outside of our fan base. It's not something I think we need to parade in front of other schools and say, this is what we have, this is something so important. It's more of a mentality that I think should be something core to who we are as Aggie Nation. It's that idea of putting your arms around the players, putting your arms around our athletes, and being able to help them, and to be able to support them in the things that they're doing. It's weird. It's kind of a modern idea, but being able to put a hashtag in front of that and have it be something that is going to be marked on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, and an idea that we can share with each other and say, this is what I'm doing right now. And that's going to be the hashtag arms around. And it's an idea that has kind of, I think, stood out throughout history, at least my history within my support of Aggie Nation. The fact is we have athletes right now who are playing for our teams, who are here, at least to some degree, because of the support that they've watched our fans give them through the ages. This isn't a call to the carpet. This isn't anything that I think we're saying we need to stand up and be who we're supposed to be. Because the fact is, the reason that Aggie Nation is important, the reason that the Spectrum has been what it's been, that Romney Stadium has become what it's been, is not because we're trying to uphold the reputation of something as an institution. We're not trying to say the Spectrum is great because the Spectrum is great. The Spectrum has been great because you've had individuals over the years taking the opportunity to support the athletes on the court. You want to talk, I mean, I've got someone sitting next to me right now. I don't think he would for a minute say, the reason I would stand up as Matt Sonnenberg and try to get on ESPN or make something that was noteworthy there, I've heard him say over and over again, it's because I wanted to support the team that was on the court at the time. Wild Bill was the same type of thing. He wasn't there to try to make a name for himself. He wasn't there to try to go out and really do so. He could in no way have anticipated what was going to happen for the fallout there. What he was doing is he was at a game to support friends that he had on the court. And more important than that, we have example after example of individuals being able to go out and make a difference. The Spectrum didn't become famous simply because the Spectrum is famous. The Spectrum was famous because we've had individuals go and say, I'm going to wrap my arms around the players on that court and do what I can to support them. And you've got example after example of it. The fact is, you start with our most recent history. Kerwin Williams playing 2 games worth of football in the fourth quarter of the famous Idaho Potato Bowl is an example of arms around. He stood up after a fumble and said, I'm going to do this. And there were those of us in the stadium who were there with him 100%. Will Davis being able to bat down that pass in the end zone against the Utah to win that game, and watching the fans storm the field after winning the first game against Utah in 17 years is an example of having our arms around our athletes. On a more somber note, Danny Berger getting hundreds, if not thousands, of cards to support him for really coming back to life is an example of having our arms around our athletes. Chucky Keaton getting injured in the Hawaii game and watching Adam Kennedy walk onto that field and leading Robert Turbin and Bobby Wagner to beat Hawaii on their home turf and really start the revolution that has become USU football is them putting their arms around each other. And I know that there are people who had their arms around the program at that point. You want to go back in history even more? Chaz Spicer nailing a 3-pointer against Utah. Chaz Spicer, once again, leading in a charge down by 13 points against Boise State. Our team not fouling in the last 3 minutes of a game and rushing the court again. That doesn't happen because things are happening and you've got a group of 5 athletes on the court. That happens because you have an entire stand full of people who are willing to wrap their arms around their athletes. There are athletes, as I said before, who the number one reason that they came to the school is because they saw footage of what our fans are willing to do for their team. And this goes beyond just one person's vision of, I'm going to wear a cool costume and make it on the Jumbotron. But the thing that has made Aggie Nation and our fan support so special through my experience here is the fact is we're from a small community. We're from a small group. One person can go make a difference. But on top of that, we are able to actually hold each other up and say, you know what, there's only 120,000 of us in this area. 10% of us are going to show up for a basketball game, and we're all going to be there and make things happen. I think that message is so core to what we can be as a fan base. And as I said, this isn't me trying to be like, we have this reputation to uphold, because it's not about that anymore. What it's about is the fact that we have athletes on the field and the court who are putting everything out there so I can be happy as a fan. You know, that they do that and they say, look, I'm going to put everything I have out there so we can win this game, so we can be happy as a group. It's amazing to me to watch. You know, you don't see it as much in the Spectrum when that I Believe That We Will Win chant has started, but you watch what happens on the football field. The whiteout last year, I sat in the student section and looked around with tears in my eyes going, I have never seen this field and this stadium be like this before. And when we started the I Believe That We Will Win chant, and you had our players pointing at the other side of the field and showing UNLV what was going to be expected from them from the game, that was moving to me. And I know it affected the way the players are playing the game. The fact is, when we say, I believe that we will win, it's not a gimmick. It's not us trying to get attention for something. In my opinion, it is 100% us saying, I honestly believe that my interaction in this game is going to be able to affect the way that things are going on that court. Arms Around is going to be something that we're going to be pushing for the rest of the year, if not the rest of ever. I don't know how long it's going to be going for. As I said, this doesn't need to be a huge mantra that the university picks up and carries through anything, but I think it's something that we as fans can use for ourselves. So use it. When in the future you do something, you have a cheer idea, and that's the core philosophy around what this is. When you're at the Spectrum, start a new cheer. Tweet something out. Say, hey, Arms Around, this is what I got for this year. When you're at the football game, tweet something out. Take your picture. Say, my arms are around at this point. When you see athletes, tell them that you're there. Tell them you got your arms around them. Anything you can do. And it's, as I said, this doesn't need to be something big in publicity. This is something that we as Aggie Nation can hold close to our hearts. That the reason that we are important to our athletes is because we're going to be with them thick and thin no matter what happens. Because I know that they're out there playing their hearts out for each other and for us. And to be honest, this is all to bring each other happiness. That's what this is all about, is they're playing so they can feel good about what the product they're able to put on the court. They can put everything out there and say, hey, I gave it my all. And I think at Aggie Nation, that's something that we have had the capacity to do since we started really making a name for ourselves, and this team has started to succeed, not only in football but in basketball. It's amazing to me what a fan base can do if it's willing to rally around its players. And to be honest, the best way that I can put this is, I believe that we can win. And because of that, my arms are around these athletes and our program. And I hope you guys can do the same.
Yes.
Whoa.
Yes.
Epic rant. Wow.
I'll tell you this much. If you come and you find me out tailgating on game days, I will throw my arm around your shoulder. And I will say, arms around, baby. Because we are all Aggies, and that is our team. And I'm going to be out there giving my all, and I hope anyone who puts their arms around me will do the same. And I'll throw my arms around them too.
Well said. Well said, both of you.
We've got some cool things planned for this idea over the next year. So, make it something that happens. Put it on Twitter. If you've got something that you can throw up on Instagram, Facebook, anywhere you can do, just throw the idea out. If you're doing something that's going to be able to support the team, we've got some cool ideas that we're going to be throwing out throughout the year. Look forward to them. I think we've got some ideas that are going to make a lot of people happy out there.
If you're ever doing something like taking pizza up to the kids in line at the Spectrum, just tweet it. Say, taking up pizza to the kids at the Spectrum. #ArmsAround. It's perfect.
This has been an inspiring episode. Thank you, Lance, for that.
Yeah.
The Front Row Show. And, guys, next week, it's game preview week.
Oh, man.
It is time, and it is on. Can't wait, and we hope you'll listen to us as always. Make sure you get in touch with us at USU Front Row on Twitter, on Facebook, #, tweet sheet, Front Rowers Unite, and now Arms Around as the new rallying cry for Aggie Nation and Front Rowers everywhere. Make sure you check out the rest of the Front Row Network, as always, usufrontrow.com, Rock Jocks, The Agents, Junkies, which is actually going to be coming live here fairly soon. They'll be doing their first episode, so you'll need to check that out. Thanks again, everyone, for listening to us here on the Front Row Show. I'm Jeff Browning.
I'm Lance Rasmussen.
And I'm Matt Sonnenberg.
Go Aggies!
Dude, never mind. Remind me next week to tell you the nuclear apocalypse stream I had a few months back. Hey, Aggie fans, thanks again for listening to this episode of The Front Row Show. Be sure to download all our archived episodes on iTunes, follow us on Twitter at USU Front Row, like our page on Facebook at facebook.com/USU Front Row, and subscribe to us on our new YouTube channel at youtube.com/USU Front Row. Go Aggies.